Greetings, friends. George Akron here from Renovator Ministries. If you read the blog lately, we've been talking about the safest place on earth, which is the kingdom of God, which is defined as the effective range of God's will, living in God's presence and in God's power every second of every day. If you read the last blog, at the end of it, we talked about the fact that we really need to begin to apply what it means to live in the kingdom of God against some of the banes of our existence. And we listed them there. And the first one that we listed is the first one that Jesus deals about in the Sermon on the Mount. He says not to murder, but he's really talking about something far less than murder, and that's our anger. He says here, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell.'" Have you thought about what fuels this anger? Have you thought about why we exhibit anger? Well, I've been doing a lot of thinking about it over the past 10, 11 years, off and on, and been meditating on the Sermon on the Mount for several years, reading a lot of great books on the Sermon on the Mount. And this is not a rocket scientist discovery when I say, because most of us know it, we just don't know how to move away from it. What fuels it is how we think and how we feel. And it drives our actions. It's, we have overt behavior that we can see, and we have covert behavior, which is the way we think. And that runs in our heads like a narrative of our life. And it's lies. It's lies from the pit of hell. Some of these narratives are, it's me against the world. It's me. I've got to do all this by myself. Essentially, I'm alone. Another one is, I must always appear like I have it all together and I'm in control. You know? Another one is that, and if you've got a strong sense of justice like me, you really have to deal with this one a lot. And that is, you always want to see justice. You want life to be fair and just. Another issue is that it goes along with, I just can never make an error. I've always got to be right, and that is this perfection deal that we get into. So basically, our anger is driven by how we think and how we feel, i.e. fear, control, manipulation. Fear, control, manipulation, driving us. And so we leak, we act out. But where does the kingdom of God come into this? The kingdom of God that we can have right now. Well, here's how it comes into it. Kingdom of God, the effective range of God's will, living in the power and the presence of God. So what does that do? Think about it yourself. If you apply that as reality and as the true narrative of our life, then are we alone? Never. Never alone. Jesus is always with us. Does he require us to be always perfect? Absolutely not. Romans 5:8 says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Fair? No, life's not fair. We know that. But as the old cliche goes, but we know how this book ends. we know that God gets the last word. And He is our refuge. And He is our strength when we live in His power and live in His presence. So, we're going to talk about that in the next blog, about how we can get a hold of our anger. It all revolves around us knowing His presence, knowing His power, and knowing all that stuff about being by ourselves, needing to be perfect, never having to mess up, always wanting things to be perfect and fair and right. How all that is bogus. It's all not true. And when we come over to the truth of the reality of our lives, and we can only do that by a constant, intentional living in the presence of God and in His power, and we do that through the spiritual disciplines. Here we go again. It all comes back to the spiritual disciplines. And we do that. We live in His kingdom, and we live in His power, and we live in His presence by constant abiding through the spiritual disciplines of solitude, silence, prayer, study, fasting, abstinence, worship, confession. That is the life of a Christian. So as I said in the last blog, are you merely just satisfied with salvation, with the cross of Christ, which we all need, which is why Jesus came to die? But He also then, as He is roaming this world, He constantly talked about the kingdom of God. And it's here now. Are you satisfied with the salvation trophy of Jesus on your mantle? Or do you want life that He talks about in John 10:10? Life and abundant. There's no abundance in the pity-potty life. Well, I'm all by myself, and life is not fair, and I'm going to mess up, and I got to be perfect. There's no abundance in that life. But when we live in the power and the presence of God, we have full abundance, knowing we're never alone, knowing that life's not perfect, but we know the end of the story, knowing that Jesus accepts us just as we are, and that we don't need to be in control because Jesus is in control. Let's begin to wrestle with that. There's way too much anger out there, in the church and out of the church. Way too much. And the good news is, there is a way out, living the kingdom life now. That's my prayer for you. Abide deeply, my friend. Until next time.